Hi students, we are ready to start the lesson. This lesson is about Upper Arlington as a community. It's going to go really deep into the idea of the values that this community shares. You'll recall that on Friday we went deep into the idea of what a community is. We looked at different examples of communities. We looked at Wally as an example of community. And we saw that every community has got three elements. Spaces, they share the same spaces. They share the same values, the things that are important to them, and they share the same experiences, history, culture. This lesson is going to go deep into Upper Arlington's values, the things that this community feels is important. You probably know that every community has different values. If you go around the world, you visit different cultures, every culture, different things are important. The culture, for example, of Japan, its values, are different than the cultural values of, say, Texas. So Upper Arlington has got its own set of values, and today we're going to experience how we're going to learn how we got those values. Where do they come from? You're going to see that they come baked right into the very first year that Upper Arlington was ever created. Our learning target is to be able to name at least 3 values consistently held by Upper Arlington citizens. Now, you're going to learn 5. What we're going to ask you to do is be able to name 3 off the top of your head, and if the past classes have been any guide, you'll be able to do this easily. 3 of the 5 values off the top of your head, and give examples of how we show those values from the past and the present. Now, to be successful in this class from here on out, you're going to need to make sure that you've got the document that you picked up at the front of the class. It's called Activity 1 on the front and Activity 2 on the back. Now, Activity 2 needs to be complete by tomorrow's class. There's going to be a check. So if you don't get it done in class today, finish it up. Come see me in Richmond if you need to. Ask me questions on Schoology, but I feel very confident that every student can get that done by class tomorrow. We'll start here. You're going to be putting this worksheet in your binder as the next page in your participation lesson. And when you've done that, we'll go ahead and get started with slide 3, okay? At any time during this presentation, this video, you need to pause it in order to write things down or to get caught up or to rewind something. Feel free to do so. I talk pretty quickly, so pause me whenever you need to. Here's slide number 3. Now, what do we see in this picture? I'd like you to write down some visual details on your activity number 1. Okay? Now, you can write down short responses, but they need to be detailed responses. So if you write just down, you see people, that's not as good as saying busy people, or what are these people doing? Do they seem like they know each other? What's on the walls? What are the buildings like? Is it drab? Is it colorful? What kind of vehicles do you see? What do you think it would sound like if you were standing there in the street? What would it feel like? So pull out a couple of visual details, put them on your activity number 1, and when you're ready to go on to the next slide, we'll move along. On slide 4, you're going to want to be able to pull this up on your own screen in a different tab, and you can get access to this presentation from Google Classroom so that you can see this video, which is on YouTube if you want to. This is a picture of, see if you can guess it. It says Thompson Park. So what are some visual details that you see in this slide? Do you see, in the last slide you saw people. What do you see here? In the last slide you saw tall buildings. What do you see here? In the last slide you saw colorful advertisements. What do you see here? Check out the image and check out the YouTube video. Write down 3 visual details. And when you're done with that, next question, as you compare the two, what's different? What's different between slide 3 and slide 4? What's important to New York City versus what's important to Upper Arlington? We can start to see the values of a community visually. And I'd like you to write down some of your thoughts for that question there. When you're ready to move on, you'll advance the video, but if you need to pause it right now, feel free to. Great, let's get some practice with slides 5 and 6. When I say practice, I mean in a few minutes, you're going to be on your own, looking through some primary sources from Upper Arlington's past, seeing if you can find evidence that Upper Arlington, looking for evidence of what Upper Arlington thought was important in the past. And we're going to do one together. It's called Upper Arlington and the Pitkin Plan. Now, the Pitkin Plan is a vocabulary term. William Pitkin Jr. is one of the most important people in early Upper Arlington history. And if you read this, reading along with me, you'll see why. It says the Upper Arlington Company, formed by real estate agents Ben and King Thompson, they're the founders of UA, hired William Pitkin Jr., a prominent landscape architect, prominent architect from Rochester, New York, to provide the most modern concepts of city planning. He developed what was known as the Pitkin Plan for UA. The Pitkin Plan was his design for Upper Arlington. It encouraged the development of curving streets to follow the land instead of a grid, like a matrix. He wanted Upper Arlington to look like curving streets, almost like a golf course, that followed the lines of the hills, the streams, the big oak trees, and this plan featured an abundance of trees instead of following the grid-like patterns used in Columbus and other big-name cities. This Pitkin Plan is what gives the historic district of Upper Arlington its distinct appearance. Winding roads, big old trees, lots of beautiful hills, lots of beautiful landscaping. It looks nice. If you want more information about the Pitkin Plan, click this link below. It takes you to the Upper Arlington City District, the official history website. But before we move on, there's 2 more questions on your activity 1. Who was William Pitkin Jr.? And what was the Pitkin Plan? I'll leave the slide up here. Feel free to pause it, write down your answers to those 2 questions, and then we'll advance. So here is the Pitkin Plan. It's a primary source document. So let's see if we can get some practice looking at a primary source document and seeing if we can pull out some evidence, that we can figure out what the early designers of Upper Arlington thought was important, How does William Pitkin's plan reflect our values as a community, Let's zoom in a little bit on this plan. You can see that it says here, Plan of Upper Arlington, the Country Club District of Columbus, Ohio, made for the King Thompson Company by William Pitkin Jr. So this is his plan, and this is what is today Upper Arlington. This is the Jones Middle School, and that big athletic field is right in here. The Mallway is right here. Okay, and these are some of these old neighborhoods in UA where you're driving along, and it's easy to get lost because the streets are windy, the houses are big, the lots are huge, the trees are so large. It's really, really fancy. It was designed to look that way. Look at these big lots, and each one of these squares is a big old house. Big old house. There's lots of little spaces in between, like little nooks and crannies. See these? Here's little nooks and crannies right there. These were each supposed to be parks. There's a park. 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 Parks everywhere, This wasn't going to be like Columbus. This was going to be a place where everybody could enjoy green spaces. And the streets follow along the hills, the existing landscaping, all the way down these rolling, gently sloping hills to the Scioto River down here. Over here, you see additional land that would someday be used for additional green spaces and parks. So it's easy to see that the early developers of Upper Arlington thought green spaces were very important. And we can see it right here in the primary source document. We're ready to turn our paper over to activity number 2. There are 5 values that Upper Arlington citizens have always shared. I'd like you to record these 5 values in column 1 of activity 2. Each one of those 5 rows is going to have one of these values. So in the first row, please write down green spaces. We saw it in the Pitkin plan, didn't we? And we still value those things today. Number 2, in the second row, great schools. Upper Arlington was founded on great schools. Number 3, athletics. We have always valued sports, sportsmanship, and athletics. In the third row. Number 4, the fourth row, friends and family. We've always wanted UA to be a place where friends and family could gather together and enjoy each other. We wanted kids to come. We wanted families with lots of children to come to UA. And finally, in the last row, excellence. We wanted high quality. You're going to see some primary source documents today that talk about how Upper Arlington's going to be the best. Upper Arlington's going to have the best homes. Upper Arlington's going to have the best yards. And they weren't bragging to be mean or egotistical about it. They were trying to say, you should come to Upper Arlington because we're going to make it the bomb diggity. It's going to be the best. So now that we have these 5 values written down in our rows, you're going to do an activity on your own. Please go back to Google Classroom, open up the Upper Arlington Now and Then folder, and you're going to see a couple of primary source documents. They're all taken from the early UA community magazine called the Northwest Columbus, to find evidence that Arlingtonians, yep, that's what we've always called ourselves, have always held each of the 5 values on your lesson guide. They thought those things were important then in 1918, and they think those things are important now in 2016. When you find a primary source document that you think can prove that Arlingtonians held that value back then in the old days, you're going to do 2 things. In that little space next to the value, you're going to write down the name of the article and a short quote from that article to use as proof. Okay? For example, in green spaces, you might write down the Pitkin plan in that middle column, right? You'll put the Pitkin plan in quotes, and below it, you'll take out like a quote or a fact or something that you saw in that primary source to prove that the Pitkin plan shows green spaces were highly valued. Now, if you have any questions about what it is that you're supposed to be doing, please come see Mr. Elliott right now. Other than that, I'm going to let you dig in and get to work.